He said it like he was asking me to pass the salt. Calm, casual, final. "We are taking your office." I nodded because that is what they expected. The good daughter, the fixer, the one who always bends. But inside, something clicked into place like a lock finally turning, and while they were measuring my desk space for my brother's content career, I was already choosing the address they would never be able to follow me into. My name is Lila Nelson. I was 29 years old, sitting at a dining table that I had paid to refinish 2 years ago. When I realized that to my family, I was not a person, I was a utility. I was a faucet they expected to run whenever they turned the handle. And tonight, they were announcing that they intended to dismantle the plumbing because they preferred the look of the pipes elsewhere. It was a Tuesday in late November. Outside the frosted windows of our suburban Minneapolis home, the wind was already practicing its winter howl, stripping the last of the dead leaves from the oak trees. Inside, the air was heavy with the smell of pot roast and the distinct, suffocating pressure of a conversation that had been decided before I even sat down. My father, Ron, wiped the corner of his mouth with a paper napkin. He folded it once, twice, into a perfect square and placed it next to his plate. It was a gesture I knew well. It meant business. It meant the patriarch was about to speak, and the rest of us were expected to listen with the reverence due to a sermon. "Lila," he said. He did not look at me directly. He looked at a spot just over my left shoulder, focusing on the wall. "Your mother and I have been talking. We are taking your office." He said it with the same emotional weight one might use to ask for the butter. Calm, casual, final. I stopped chewing. The piece of carrot in my mouth suddenly felt like a stone. I swallowed it whole, feeling it scrape all the way down. I did not drop my fork. I did not gasp. I simply froze, my hand hovering over my plate, waiting for the punchline that I knew, deep down, was not coming. "My office," I repeated. My voice was level, stripped of inflection. It was a skill I had perfected over a lifetime of navigating this house. Emotion was blood in the water here. It only attracted sharks. "Well, it is the living room, Lila," my mother chimed in. She was already pouring gravy over Carter's second helping of potatoes, her movements flustered and eager. "It is a common area. We all share this house." Technically, she was right. It was a corner of the living room, but describing it as common area was a deliberate erasure of 3 years of labor. When the world shut down and my company, Hollow Ridge Digital, went fully remote, I had not just plopped a laptop on the coffee table. I had built a workspace. I had purchased a sleek, motorized standing desk with my own money. I had installed dual 4K monitors on articulating arms to save space. I had bought a filing cabinet for my contracts and a noise-canceling partition that I folded away every evening so the family could watch television without looking at my spreadsheets. That corner was not just furniture. It was the command center where I managed project timelines for clients across 3 time zones. It was where I earned the salary that paid for the high-speed internet that was currently streaming a football game in the background. It was where I had built a career that everyone at this table treated as a hobby. "Carter needs the space," my father continued, finally shifting his gaze to me. His eyes were hard, daring me to object. "He is going to set up a proper studio for the podcast." I looked across the table at my brother. Carter was 24. He was wearing a hoodie that cost more than my weekly grocery budget, and he was currently scrolling through his phone with a bored expression. He did not look up, but I saw the corner of his mouth twitch. It was a half smile, a smirk. It was the expression of a man who had already won the war and was just waiting for the defeated general to sign the treaty. "The podcast," I said. "It is taking off, Lila," my mother said, her voice breathless with a delusion that bordered on tragic. "You should see the numbers. His fans are increasing every day. He needs a professional environment. You know, soundproofing, a green screen. He cannot do that in the basement. It is too damp." 41, I said. The room went quiet. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator, a refrigerator I had paid to repair last July. Excuse me, Carter asked, finally looking up. 41 followers, I said. I did not blink. I checked your page before dinner. You have 41 followers, Carter. And 30 of them are accounts with no profile pictures and names that are just random strings of numbers. Carter dropped his fork. It clattered loudly against the ceramic plate. See, he said, turning to Dad. She does not get it. It is about potential, Lila. It is about growth. You have to invest to build. I have a vision for Echoes of Life. It is going to be huge, but I cannot record with the washer running next to my head. So I lose my job space so you can record a show for 11 real people, I asked. You do not lose your space, Dad said, his voice dropping an octave. This was the warning tone. You can work in your bedroom or the kitchen table. You have a laptop. It is portable. That is the whole point of your job, isn't it? It is not fixed. Carter needs infrastructure. I looked at them, really looked at them. I saw my father, a man who had retired early and now spent his days consulting on projects that never seemed to pay. I saw my mother, whose love language was enabling her son's incompetence, and I saw Carter, the golden boy who had failed out of trade school because the instructors had it out for him, and who was now pivoting to content creation because he thought talking into a microphone was easier than working. They were not asking me to move. They were evicting me. And the reason they felt comfortable doing it was sitting right there in my silence. I had trained them to do this. A memory flashed in my mind, sharp and stinging. 5 years ago, the transmission on the family sedan had blown. I was fresh out of college, saving every penny for a deposit on an apartment. Dad had sat me down, just like this. You are the only one with liquid cash right now. Lila, we will pay you back when the tax return comes in. I had paid the $2,000. The tax return came and went. When I asked about it, I was accused of being petty. We fed you for 18 years, Mom had said, wiping tears that dried instantly when I apologized. Then there was the roof repair, the medical deductible when Carter broke his arm falling off a skateboard. He was too old to be riding. The groceries, the streaming services, every time. It started as help, just a little help. You are the responsible one. Lila, you are the smart one. You are the fixer. But somewhere along the line, help had calcified into duty. My competence had become their crutch, and my salary had become their safety net. They did not see my desk as my property because they did not see me as a separate entity in their minds. I was an extension of the household infrastructure, like the water heater or the thermostat. And you do not ask the thermostat for permission to change the temperature. We are measuring the space tomorrow morning, Dad said, slicing another piece of meat. You should probably clear your things off tonight. We don't want to damage your monitors. He said monitors with a slight sneer, as if they were toys. Carter looked at me. He took a sip of his soda, his eyes gleaming with triumph. He was enjoying this. He enjoyed watching me be diminished. It made him feel big. I looked down at my plate. The pot roast was cold. In the past, this was the moment where I would have argued, I would have explained, with logical, desperate pleas, that my contracts required a secure environment, that I had client calls, that I could not work effectively from a bed. I would have raised my voice. There would have been shouting. Mom would have cried. Dad would have stormed off. And in the end, I would have apologized and given in anyway. But tonight, the script had changed. Something inside my chest, right behind my ribcage, clicked. It was a small, mechanical sensation, like a tumbler in a lock sliding into place. It was the sound of a door shutting. Not a door in the house, but a door in my soul. I picked up my fork. I took a bite of the cold potato. I chewed slowly, swallowed, and then placed the fork down with deliberate precision. I looked at my father. Okay, I said. The word hung in the air. Carter blinked, confused. He had armed himself for a fight, and I had just walked past him. Okay, Dad asked, suspicious. Okay, I repeated. It is your house. If you need the space for Carter's career, Then you should take it. My mother let out a breath she had been holding. Oh, Lila. Thank you. I knew you would understand. It is just for a while. Just until he gets on his feet. Of course, I said. Family first. I stood up. My chair scraped against the hardwood floor, a sound that usually made my father wince, but tonight he was too busy looking relieved to notice. I am going to head up, I said. I have some work to finish before I move everything. Good girl, Dad said. He did not look up. He was already reaching for the salt. I turned and walked out of the dining room. I walked through the living room, past the corner that was still mine. The monitors were dark, sleeping giants reflecting the dim light of the street lamps outside. My ergonomic chair, which I had spent $300 on because my back hurt from long hours, sat empty. They were not just taking a desk. They were taking the only place in this house where I felt like an adult. They were stripping away the physical evidence of my success because it made Carter feel inadequate. I climbed the stairs, 1, 2, 3. Each step felt heavier than the last, but it was not the weight of sadness. It was the weight of clarity. I entered my bedroom and closed the door. I did not slam it. I turned the lock. It was a flimsy privacy lock, the kind you could pick with a hairpin. But it was the only barrier I had. My room was a time capsule of my teenage years, overlaid with the debris of a 29-year-old woman who was stuck in suspended animation. The walls were still painted a soft lavender I had chosen when I was 16. I sat on the edge of my bed. The house was quiet now, save for the muffled murmur of the television downstairs. They were probably watching a sitcom, laughing, secure in the knowledge that the Lila problem had been handled. The fixer had fixed it by disappearing. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over the screen. Usually, when I came up here after a family dispute, I would scroll through Instagram, looking at the curated lives of my friends, feeling a hot, shameful envy, or I would open my banking app, staring at my savings, calculating how many more months I needed to suffer before I could afford a 20% down payment on a house in this insane market. Tonight, I did not open Instagram. I did not open the bank app. I opened a rental application I had downloaded 6 months ago and never used. Zillow Rentals. I had always told myself that renting was a waste of money. That was Ron Nelson's voice in my head. Why pay someone else's mortgage when you can save and buy your own equity? Stay home, save money, be smart. But I realize now that I was paying rent. I was paying rent with my sanity. I was paying rent with my dignity. I was paying rent with my very identity, and the landlord was raising the price every single day. I typed in St. Paul into the search bar. I filtered for available now. I did not look for 2-bedroom apartments. I did not look for places with granite countertops or in-unit laundry or covered parking. I adjusted the price slider. I looked for studio. I looked for quiet. A listing popped up. It was in a converted warehouse district. The photos were grainy. The floor was concrete. The windows were high and narrow. It looked nothing like the suburban comfort I was used to. It looked cold. It looked sparse. It looked like heaven. It was 650 square feet of space that no one else could claim. The listing said, "Credit check required. First month and deposit due at signing." Quiet building. No parties. I looked at the contact button. It was 8:30 at night. Most people would wait until morning. I tapped Contact Property Manager. I typed a message. My name is Lila Nelson. I am a remote project manager with a steady income and a credit score of 780. I'm looking for immediate occupancy. I can view the unit tomorrow morning. I do not have pets. I do not have loud hobbies. I just need a place to work. I hit send. Downstairs. I heard Carter laugh. It was a loud, braying sound that vibrated through the floorboards. He was probably already planning where to put his microphone. He was probably measuring the desk in his mind, imagining the fame that was just around the corner. Let him measure. Let him have the desk. Let him have the living room. I looked at my phone screen as the message sent notification appeared. They thought they were taking my office. They thought they were pushing me into a smaller box, forcing me to shrink so my brother could expand. They thought I was retreating to my room to lick my wounds and accept my place in the hierarchy. They were wrong. I stood up and walked to the closet. I pulled out a duffel bag, the black one I used for gym trips I rarely took. I unzipped it. The sound was loud in the quiet room. A sharp tearing noise like fabric ripping. I walked over to the bookshelf. I did not pack clothes. I did not pack shoes. I reached for the binder on the top shelf, the one labeled tax documents. I reached for my passport. I reached for the hard drive that contained the backup of my entire digital life. I was not just moving out. I was defecting. I packed the things that proved I existed on paper. The things they would need if they ever wanted to file a joint tax return again, or apply for a loan in my name, or verify household income for a refinancing scheme. I placed them gently into the bag. The air in the room felt different. It was no longer stagnant. It was vibrating with potential. For the first time in years, the future did not look like a long, gray tunnel of obligations. It looked like a concrete floor in St. Paul. I sat back on the bed and waited for the email notification from the landlord. My heart beating a slow, steady rhythm against my ribs. It was the rhythm of a countdown. They had taken my office, but in doing so, they had accidentally handed me the keys to my life, and by the time they realized what they had done, I would be gone, and the only thing left in the corner of the living room would be a desk they could not afford to keep and a silence they were not prepared to handle. To understand why I did not scream when my father told me he was taking my office, you have to understand the invisible constitution that governed the Nelson household. It was never written down, never framed on the wall, and never spoken aloud, but it was more binding than any federal law. It had two primary articles. Article 1 stated that Carter was a reservoir of untapped potential that must be protected at all costs. Article 2 stated that I was the infrastructure that kept the reservoir from leaking. I was the stable one. Carter was the special one. I learned this distinction when I was 17 years old. It was the summer before my senior year of high school. I had spent 3 months working double shifts at a humid, grease-coated burger joint to save up for a laptop. I needed it for college applications and for the advanced placement English course I had fought to get into. I remember the day I finally had enough money. I bought a refurbished laptop, a heavy gray brick of a machine that hummed like a lawnmower and heated up enough to scorch my thighs. I was proud of it. I treated that plastic brick like it was made of gold bullion because it represented 500 hours of smelling like onion rings and stale fryer oil. 2 weeks later, Carter decided he wanted to be a photographer. He had taken one picture of a sunset with his phone that my mother declared was breathtaking that weekend. My parents came home with a brand new camera. It was sleek, professional, and cost 3 times what my laptop had cost. When I asked how they could afford it, considering they had just told me we could not afford to fix the air conditioning in my car, my father shrugged. He has an eye. Lila. He had said, "You cannot teach talent. We have to nurture it." That was the first time I felt the sting of their selective generosity. My hard work was expected, something I had to sustain on my own. Carter's whims were treated like divine callings that required immediate financial sacrifice from the entire family. I worked for my tools. Carter was gifted his toys. The pattern solidified when I went to college. I stayed in state to save money, working 2 part-time jobs, one at the university library shelving books in dusty silence, and another at a coffee shop where I learned to smile while people screamed at me about oat milk. I graduated with honors and 0 debt. Not because I was rich, but because I did not sleep. Carter took a different path. He decided traditional college was a scam. My parents nodded and agreed that the system was broken. He enrolled in a trade school to become an electrician. A solid career choice that lasted exactly 6 weeks. He dropped out because, according to him, the instructor had a vendetta against him. According to the school, Carter stopped showing up for morning labs. When he came home, tossing his expensive tools into the garage, where they would rust for the next 5 years, my parents did not scold him. They sat him down and told him that maybe the program was just too rigid for a creative mind like his. They blamed the school. They blamed the curriculum. They blamed the timing. They never blamed Carter. And because Carter was never to blame, someone else had to be the solution. That was where I came in. I became the designated fixer of the Nelson family reality. It started with small things. The printer would jam, and suddenly, it was my job to fix it because I was good with computers. The Wi-Fi would spot, and I was the one on hold with the service provider for 45 minutes. But as I entered my 20s and started making a real salary, the requests grew teeth. I remember a specific Tuesday 3 years ago. The washing machine had died mid-cycle, leaving a load of wet towels sitting in stagnant water. My father stood in front of the machine, staring at it with a look of helpless confusion that I later realized was a performance. He kicked the base of the washer gently. "Well," he said, sighing, "that is it. It is done." He looked at me. He did not ask me to buy a new one. He did not ask me to call a repairman. He just looked at me with those soft, expectant eyes and delivered the line that had become the soundtrack of my adult life. "You are good at this stuff. Lila, can you look into it?" Look into it was code. It meant research the problem, find a repair service, schedule the appointment, be home to let them in, and ultimately, slide your credit card across the counter when the bill comes because Mom and I are a little tight until the first of the month. I did it. I paid $350 for a new pump. When I mentioned the money later, Dad waved a hand dismissively and said, "We will square up later." We never squared up. The phrase, "you are good at this stuff," was a trap. It sounded like a compliment. It sounded like they were acknowledging my competence, my capability, my intelligence, but it was not praise. It was a shackle. By defining me as the culpable one, they absolved themselves of the responsibility to be capable. If I was good at handling bills, why should they bother learning online banking? If I was good at organizing, why should they clean up their own messes? My mother had her own version of this trap. She dealt in emotional currency. She would come into my room back before I moved my office downstairs and sit on the edge of my bed while I was trying to work. She would look at me with teary eyes and say, "Lila, you are the blessing of this house. I do not know what we would do without you. You are the rock." For a long time, I let those words fill me up. I wanted to be the rock. I wanted to be the blessing. Who does not want to be the savior of their own family, but the praise always had a price tag attached to it. "You are the blessing of this house," she would say, and then, without even a breath in between, "Do you think you could transfer $100 to the joint account just for groceries? The electric bill was higher than we thought, and your father's check does not clear until Thursday." I would transfer the money, and she would kiss my forehead and leave. And I would feel a strange mixture of pride and hollowness. It took me years to realize that they did not love me for who I was. They loved me for what I provided. I was not a daughter. I was a human overdraft protection service. The turning point the moment the resentment began to curdle into cold. Hard data happened about 18 months ago. I was sitting in my car after a long day at work, and my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a request from Carter for $50 on a payment app. The note just said pizza. I stared at the screen. $50 for pizza. For one person, I denied the request. 2 minutes later, my mother called. "Lila," she said, her voice tight. "Why did you decline Carter? He is out with friends. It is embarrassing for him. He is 23 years old." "Mom," I said, "he can buy his own pizza." "He forgot his wallet," she said. "Just send it. I will pay you back tomorrow." I sent it. She did not pay me back tomorrow. That night, lying in bed, I opened the notes application on my phone. I created a new note and titled it simply, "The Ledger." I started typing. I went back through my bank statements for the last year. I listed every loan that was never repaid, every emergency I had covered, every grocery run where I paid the total but only ate a single yogurt cup. January 4th. Car battery for Mom, $120. February 12th. Loan for Dad's dental copay, $80. March 3rd. Carter's speeding ticket to keep insurance down $200. April 10th. Groceries. $150. May 1st internet bill. Because Dad forgot to mail the check $90. The numbers scrolled down the screen. A waterfall of lost income. I spent hours that night just adding it up. When I finally reached the bottom and typed out the total, I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. It was over $4,000 in 6 months. $4,000. That was my emergency fund. That was a trip to Europe I had never taken. That was the security deposit on an apartment I had been too afraid to rent because I was worried about leaving them alone. But the note served a purpose greater than accounting. It was my anchor to reality. Gaslighting is a slow, subtle poison. My family was expert at it. If I ever brought up money, they would act shocked. Lila, why are you so obsessed with money? It is just paper. Family helps family. You are being selfish. They made me feel like I was crazy for counting. They made me feel like a miser for wanting to keep the money I earned working 50 hours a week. But the list in my phone did not lie. The numbers were objective. They were cold. Hard proof that I was not crazy. I was being bled dry. This financial bleeding was painful. But it was not the thing that broke my heart. I could make more money. I was young. I was skilled. And I was industrious. The thing that broke me was the realization of what that money represented to them. To me. That money was my life energy. It was the hours I spent staring at spreadsheets until my eyes burned. It was the stress headaches. It was the early mornings and the late nights. To them, my sacrifice was nothing. It was expected. It was the baseline. They did not see me giving them a gift when I paid the electric bill. They saw a light switch that worked, and they gave it no more thought than that. They felt entitled to my labor. They believed, truly and deeply, that because I was capable, I owed them my capability. It was a tax I was forced to pay for the crime of being competent. And Carter was exempt from this tax. His incompetence was his shield. Because he could not handle things a helplessness he had carefully cultivated and they had eagerly enabled, he was never asked to contribute. He was allowed to just be. He was allowed to dream, to fail, to play, to spend. I was not allowed to just be. I was only allowed to do. So when my father sat at that dining table and said, "We are taking your office," it was not just about the square footage in the living room. If they had asked me, truly asked me, I might have said yes. If they had come to me with respect, acknowledged that it was my workspace, and asked if we could find a solution for Carter, I would have likely rearranged my life to help. That is who I was. But they did not ask. They announced. They looked at the space I had built, the career I had forged, the boundaries I had tried to erect, and they decided that none of it mattered as much as Carter's whim of the week. They were not just taking a desk. They were confirming everything I had written in that note on my phone. They were confirming that in the hierarchy of this house, my professional livelihood was less important than my brother's imaginary stardom. They were confirming that my comfort was a resource to be harvested for their convenience. They were taking the physical manifestation of my independence. That corner of the living room was the one place where I was CEO, where I was respected, where I was in control, by giving it to Carter. They were saying that even my independence was property of the Nelson Family Trust. I sat on my bed, staring at the rental application on my phone screen, and I realized that the office was just a symbol. They had already taken my money. They had taken my time. They had taken my energy. Now they wanted to take my space. If I stayed, if I moved my desk to the basement or the kitchen table, if I nodded and smiled and fixed this problem like I fixed the washing machine, there would be nothing left of me. I would be completely consumed. I would wake up in 10 years, 40 years old, still paying their bills, still apologizing for my own existence. While Carter played pretend in a studio I paid for, the pain in my chest was sharp, but it was clean. It was the pain of a bone breaking so it could finally be set right. I was not just leaving a house. I was resigning from my position as the family fixer. I was handing in my notice. I looked at the text message thread with my mother. Her last message was from 3 hours ago. Can you pick up milk on your way home? Carter drank it all. I did not reply. I closed the messaging app and opened my banking app. I looked at the balance. It was enough. It was not a fortune, but it was enough to buy silence. It was enough to buy a lock on a door that only I had the key to. I thought about the phrase my father loved to use. You are good at this stuff. He was right. I was good at this stuff. I was good at planning. I was good at executing. I was good at survival. And for the first time in my life, I was going to use those skills for the one client I had always neglected myself. The building in St. Paul was a brick fortress from the 1920s, standing stoic and unimpressed on a street lined with maple trees that had long since lost their leaves. It did not have a doorman. It did not have a heated underground garage. It did not have a gym with Peloton bikes. It had a buzzer system that sounded like a dying goose and a front door that required a specific jiggle of the key to open. I loved it immediately. The property manager was a man named Mr. Henderson, who wore a gray wool coat and looked at his watch 3 times in the span of 2 minutes. He did not ask me about my family. He did not ask if I was a good daughter. He simply unlocked apartment 4B and stepped aside. The space was small. It was technically a studio. Though a heavy velvet curtain could separate the sleeping alcove from the living area, the floors were hardwood, scratched by decades of previous tenants, people who had lived here, loved here, and left here without asking my permission for anything. The radiator hissed with a sound that felt like a secret conversation. The windows were tall, letting in the pale, gray light of the afternoon. It is $850 a month, Mr. Henderson said. Heat and water included. You pay electric and internet. First and last required to move in. No loud parties. No pets over 30 pounds. I walked to the center of the room. I listened. I heard a car drive by outside. I heard the radiator clank. I heard Mr. Henderson breathing. I did not hear the television blaring sports commentary. I did not hear my mother asking where the scissors were. I did not hear Carter rehearsing his intro for the 5th time. I will take it, I said. Mr. Henderson blinked. Do you want to check the water pressure or the closets? I want to sign the lease, I said. Right now. I pulled a folder from my tote bag. Inside, I had prepared everything. My credit report, printed that morning at the library because I refused to use the home printer I bought. My employment verification letter, 3 months of pay stubs, a cashier's check for $1,700. Mr. Henderson looked at the documents. He looked at the check. He looked at me. For the first time, he stopped looking at his watch. You do not mess around, do you? He asked. No, I said. I do not. 20 minutes later, I had a key in my pocket. It was a small brass piece of metal, cool to the touch. I kept my hand in my coat pocket all the way to the bus stop, rubbing my thumb over the ridges of the key. It felt like a weapon. It was the first thing I had owned in years that was exclusively mine. There was no spare key under the mat for Mom. There was no code Carter knew. I went back to the house in the suburbs, stepping through the front door just as the sun was setting. The familiar smell of the house, a mix of lemon pledge and stale coffee, hit me, but it did not suffocate me this time. I was inoculated. I had the antibody in my pocket. That evening marked the beginning of my quiet strike. I did not announce it. I did not storm into the living room and declare that I was no longer the family servant. I simply stopped. It began with dinner, usually on Wednesdays. I stopped at the premium grocery store on the way home to pick up steaks or fresh salmon, footing the bill because Dad loves a good steak and Mom needs the omega-3. Tonight, I walked into the kitchen with a single brown paper bag. Mom was at the counter, chopping onions for a salad she assumed would accompany the main course I was expected to provide. She looked up as I entered. "Oh, good. You are home," she said. "Did you get the ribeyes? Carter is starving?" I set the bag down. I pulled out a single container of pre-made sushi, a bottle of sparkling water, and a small tub of Greek yogurt. "No," I said. I opened the sushi. Mom stopped chopping. The knife hovered over a half-diced red onion. What do you mean? No, I mean I did not get the ribeyes, I said. I popped a piece of salmon roll into my mouth. I am just having this. I have some work to finish. But what are we supposed to eat? She asked. Her voice contained genuine confusion, as if the concept of acquiring food was a mystery she had never solved. There is pasta in the pantry, I said, walking toward the stairs, and I think there is some ground beef in the freezer. You just have to defrost it. Defrost it, Carter's voice floated in from the living room. That takes forever. I thought we were having steak. Change of plans, I called back. Not breaking my stride, I went up to my room, closed the door, and ate my sushi in silence. Downstairs, I heard the murmurs of a family meeting. They were discussing the lack of steak. They were probably deciding that I was just having a mood because of the office situation. Let them think that. Let them think I was sulking. It gave me cover. 2 days later, the internet connection began to stutter. This was a common occurrence in our neighborhood. Usually, when the router blinked red, a siren would go off in the Nelson household. Dad would shout my name from his recliner. Carter would text me in all caps, LAG. I was in the kitchen, making a single cup of coffee, when the shout came. Lila. The net is down, Dad yelled. I took a sip of my coffee. It was hot and bitter. I did not move. Lila. I walked to the sink and rinsed my spoon. Carter appeared in the doorway, his phone in his hand. Hey, did you hear Dad? The Wi-Fi is dead? I am in the middle of uploading a clip. I looked at the router, sitting on the hallway console table. The little light was blinking an angry orange. I knew exactly what was wrong. It needed a firmware update, or maybe just a hard reset, a 3-minute fix. That is annoying, I said. I walked past him. Carter turned, following me with his eyes. Well, are you going to fix it? I am on my lunch break, I said. I have to get back to a call. You cannot make a call if the internet is down, he pointed out. Thinking he had trapped me in a logic loop. I have a hotspot on my work phone, I said. Data plan paid for by Holleridge. Corporate use only. I went upstairs and engaged the hotspot on my phone. I connected my laptop. I continued working. Downstairs, chaos ensued. I heard Dad on the phone with the service provider, shouting, "Representative," at an automated voice system. I heard Carter pacing, complaining that he was losing engagement. I heard Mom asking if unplugging it would help, and Dad snapping that she would break it. They struggled for 2 hours. 2 hours of frustration that I could have solved in 2 minutes, but those 2 minutes were no longer for sale. The house began to reveal its true mechanics. It was a machine that ran on friction, and I had been the oil. Without me, the gears began to grind. The printer in the den jammed the next morning. Dad needed to print a shipping label for a return. He rattled the paper tray. He cursed the manufacturer. He called for me. I was in the hallway, putting on my coat. "Paper jam," he announced, stepping back as if presenting me with a gift. "The manual is online," I said, buttoning my coat. "Or you can just write the address on the box with a marker." "I do not want to write it," he said, offended. "It looks unprofessional." "Then you should probably read the manual," I said, and walked out the door. I walked to the bus stop. Even though my car was in the driveway, I needed to get used to the rhythm of public transit for when I moved to St. Paul. Plus, leaving the car there gave them a false sense of security. They saw the vehicle and assumed the driver was still available. On Saturday, Carter approached me while I was reading a book in the sunroom. He was wearing his business jacket, a blazer he had bought at a thrift store that smelled faintly of mothballs. "Hey," he said, tapping his car keys against his leg. "I need a favor. Big opportunity." I did not look up from my book. "What is it?" "I am meeting a potential collaborator downtown. Guy runs a crypto channel. Huge reach. We are going to brainstorm cross-promotion." "Okay," I said. "Good luck." He stood there. The silence stretched. He was waiting for me to offer. He was waiting for me to say, "Do you need a ride?" or do you want gas money? My car is making that noise again, he said. The clicking one. I do not want to risk it on the highway. You should get that looked at, I said, turning the page. Right. So, can you drive me? It is at 2:00. I will be done by 4. I finally looked up. I marked my place in the book with a finger. No, I said. Carter laughed. A short, nervous bark. What do you mean? No, you are not doing anything. You are reading a book. I am reading, I agreed, and I'm enjoying it. Lila, come on. This is for my career. Mom said you would take me. Mom was incorrect, I said. I pointed out the window, toward the main road. The 64 bus runs every 15 minutes. It drops you right downtown. It costs $2.50. Carter's face went red. I cannot take the bus to a business meeting. I will look like a loser. Then you should have fixed your car, I said, or called an Uber. I do not have Uber money right now, he snapped. I invested everything in the new microphone. Sounds like a liquidity problem, I said, and went back to reading. He stood there for another minute, vibrating with rage. He was not angry that he had to find a ride. He was angry that the appliance he called Sister had stopped working. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. Half an hour later, I saw him walking toward the bus stop, his blazer flapping in the wind, looking furious and small. I did not feel guilty. I felt light. The days turned into a week. The atmosphere in the house shifted from annoyance to a low-grade hostility. The sink piled up with dishes because I stopped loading the dishwasher after everyone else's meals. The trash can overflowed because I stopped taking it out on Tuesday nights. They walked around the messes, stepping over them, waiting for the magic cleaning fairy to return. They did not realize the fairy had handed in her resignation. At night, while the house slept, the real work began. I had bought a stack of heavy-duty plastic bins and hidden them in the back of my closet. Every night at 1 a.m, when the only sound was the settling of the foundation, I packed. I did not pack my sweaters or my jeans yet. Those would be noticed. I packed the evidence of my life. I took the file folder containing my birth certificate and my Social Security card from the family safe in the den. I did it quietly, turning the dial with the precision of a safecracker. They would not notice those were gone until they needed them, and they never needed them unless they were trying to claim me as a dependent on something. I went into the office now cluttered with Carter's empty energy drink cans and acoustic foam squares he had yet to hang up, and retrieved my external hard drives. These drives held 10 years of my digital life. Photos, tax returns, portfolios, journals. I wrapped them in bubble wrap and placed them in a bin. I found the spare car key, the one I had paid to replace when Mom lost hers, and put it in the bin. I found the warranty paperwork for the appliances I had bought. The refrigerator, the washer, the dryer. I packed those too. If these machines broke after I left, they would have to figure out the serial numbers themselves. I labeled the bins with a thick black marker. I did not write kitchen or bedroom on the first bin, containing my contracts and professional certifications. I wrote work on the second bin, containing 7 years of bank statements and the ledger I had printed out. I wrote bills on the third bin, containing my diplomas, my awards, and the deed to my car. I wrote proof. These were not just categories. They were the 3 pillars of the argument I would never bother to make out loud. Work. I did it. They did not. Bills. I paid them. They did not. Proof. I existed independently of them. One night, I was taping up the proof box when my door creaked. I froze. The hallway was dark. I waited. Lila. It was Mom's voice, thick with sleep. Is everything okay? I heard a noise. I slid the box into the back of the closet with my foot and stood up, blocking the view. I am fine, Mom, I whispered, just reorganizing the closet. Couldn't sleep. Oh, she said. She yawned. Okay, well, keep it down. Carter has a recording session in the morning. He needs his rest. I know, I said. He needs his rest. She drifted back to her room. I closed the door and locked it. I looked at the closet. She was worried about Carter's rest. She did not ask why her daughter was awake at 2 in the morning. She did not ask why I was reorganizing a closet in the dark. She only cared that the noise might disturb the golden boy. I sat down on the floor and pulled the tape dispenser closer. I ripped off another strip. The sound was sharp, like a bandage being torn off skin. I was done hurting. I was done waiting. The house was falling apart around them, the infrastructure crumbling in slow motion, and they were still sleepwalking, dreaming of podcasts and fame. They thought they were taking my office. They had no idea that I was taking the foundation with me. I looked at the calendar on my phone. 5 days. 5 days until the truck arrived. 5 days until I turned the key in the lock at apartment 4B. I lay down on the floor. Next to the boxes, the carpet was old and smelled of dust. But for the first time in 29 years, I breathed easy. I was already gone. I was just a ghost haunting the hallway, waiting for the right moment to fade away completely. It was Thursday evening when the Cold War in the Nelson household turned hot. The tension had been building for days, a static charge accumulating in the dry air, waiting for a spark. That spark arrived in the form of a yellow tape measure snapping back into its plastic casing. I was in the kitchen, washing a mug. My hands were submerged in soapy water. The warmth a stark contrast to the chill I felt radiating from the living room. Through the pass-through window, I saw my father, Ron, standing in the middle of what used to be my workspace. He was holding the tape measure. He looked like an undertaker sizing up a coffin. He extended the metal tape across the surface of my standing desk, the mahogany-finished desk I had researched for weeks and paid $800 for with my bonus check last year. He frowned, muttered something to himself, and retracted the tape with a sharp snap. "It is tight," he said to the empty room, though he knew I was listening. "But if we clear this out by Saturday, the new one should fit." I turned off the faucet. The silence in the kitchen was sudden and absolute. I dried my hands on a towel, walking slowly into the living room. "Clear what out?" I asked. My voice was calm, but my pulse was hammering in my throat. Dad looked up. He didn't look guilty. He looked busy. "The desk," he said. "I called Bob from the lodge. He needs a desk for his shop. I told him he could have this one for $50 if he hauls it away Saturday morning." The air left the room. "You sold my desk," I said. It wasn't a question, but it required an answer I couldn't comprehend. "I didn't sell it. Lila," he said, waving a hand as if swatting away a fly. "I'm getting rid of it. Carter needs a wraparound setup. You know, for the monitors and the mixer. This standing thing is too small. It doesn't have the flow." "I bought that desk," I said. I took a step forward. "I paid $800 for it. And it's been taking up space in my living room for 2 years, he countered, his voice rising just enough to assert dominance. "Consider it rent." "Rent," I repeated. "I pay the electric bill. I pay the internet. I pay for the groceries you're currently digesting. That is the rent." "Don't start with the money again," Mom's voice cut in. She appeared from the hallway, carrying a basket of laundry. She set it down on the sofa with a sigh, positioning herself between me and Dad, the peacemaker who always carried ammunition for the other side. "It is just a desk, Lila. You are making such a big deal out of nothing. Carter needs the space to be professional. Bob is doing us a favor taking it." "A favor?" I looked at her, incredulous. "He is taking my property. That is not a favor. That is theft." "Oh, stop it," Mom said, waving a hand. "It is family property. Everything in this house is for the family." "Is Carter's microphone family property?" I asked. "Can I sell it to Bob?" "That is different," she snapped. "That is his career." "And what is this?" I pointed to the desk, to the dual monitors that were currently dark. "This is my career. This is how I pay for the internet that allows him to have a career." Carter walked in then. He was holding a bag of chips, chewing loudly. He looked from me to Dad to Mom, gauging the temperature of the room. He didn't look worried. He looked bored. "What is the yelling about?" he asked, crunching a chip. Your sister is being dramatic about the desk, Dad said. I told her we need it gone for your studio, Carter shrugged. I mean, yeah, I ordered the new one yesterday. It is coming Monday. I need the floor clear. He looked at me, his eyes sliding over me with a casual dismissal that hurt more than any insult. You can just work downstairs, Lila. The basement has that table in the corner. It is quiet down there. Good for whatever it is you do. Spreadsheets. The basement. Our basement was unfinished. It was a concrete box that smelled of mildew and old paint. It was where we stored the holiday decorations and the broken treadmill. It was damp, dark, and cold. The basement, I said flatly. Yeah, Carter said. It is private. You like privacy, right? It is 40 degrees in the basement, I said. Put on a sweater, Dad said. He turned his back to me, dismissing me. He tapped the tape measure again. Bob will be here at 9 on Saturday. Have your computer off of it by then. I stood there for a moment, looking at them. A tableau of a family, the father who ruled, the mother who enabled, and the son who took. They were a closed circuit. I was just the battery they plugged in when the lights flickered. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the laundry basket. I didn't flip the table. Okay, I said. It was the second time I had used that word to end a war. It had the same effect. They relaxed. Dad's shoulders dropped. Mom smiled. A tight, victorious little smile. See, she said. I knew you would be reasonable. We just have to support each other. Right, I said. Support? I walked upstairs. My legs felt numb. I went into my room and sat at my small vanity table. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from a rage so cold it felt like ice in my veins. They were going to sell my desk on Saturday. I looked at my phone. It was Thursday. I had planned to move on Monday, to give myself the weekend to pack slowly. Monday was too late. If I waited until Monday, my desk would be gone. My monitors might be next. Once they started liquidating my assets to fund Carter's delusions, they wouldn't stop. I was a store going out of business, and they were the liquidators. I needed to leave. Now, I opened my laptop, my personal one, not the work machine. I needed to check my finances. I needed to make sure the deposit for the apartment had cleared. I needed to see exactly how much runway I had. I logged into my bank account. The interface loaded. I scanned the recent transactions. Rent check, cleared. Grocery store, $42. Gas station, $30. And then, a string of transactions I didn't recognize. Social Boost Pro, $49.99. Instagrow Gold, $99. Trendmaster Viral, $29.99. I frowned. I scrolled down. There were more. Social Boost Pro, $49.99. Last month Instagrow Gold, $99. Last month I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck. I clicked on the transaction details. They were recurring subscriptions. They had been hitting my account for 3 months. I did the math in my head. Nearly $600. I sat back, staring at the screen. How did they have my card information? And then I remembered, 4 months ago, Mom wanted to buy a specific blender she saw on a morning show. She couldn't find her purse. Just use mine. Mom, I had said, I will read you the numbers. She had written them down. She was supposed to throw the paper away. I closed my eyes. I could see it clearly. The piece of paper, probably stuck to the fridge or tucked into a drawer. And Carter, desperate for validation, needing to show that his brand was growing. He hadn't just taken the living room. He was funding his fake popularity with my money. Those 41 followers. The rapid growth Mom was bragging about, I bought them. I bought them without knowing it. I stood up and walked to the door of my room. I could hear them downstairs. Carter was explaining something to Dad about audio interfaces. Dad was listening, enraptured. I wanted to run down there. I wanted to shove the laptop screen in Carter's face. I wanted to scream, "You are a fraud. You are stealing from me to pretend you are famous." I put my hand on the doorknob, and then I stopped. If I went down there now, what would happen? Carter would deny it. He would say it was a mistake, or worse, he would admit it. And Mom would jump in. "Oh, Lila, it is just a few dollars. He is investing in his future. We will pay you back. Don't be so stingy." They would make me the villain. They would turn my theft into their charity. And they would know I was watching. They would know I was checking. They would realize the bank of Lila was closing. If they knew I was angry, they would be on guard. They might hide the car keys. They might guilt-trip me into staying just until we sort this out. No. I took my hand off the doorknob. I walked back to the laptop. I did not scream. I clicked. First, I went to the bank's website. I reported the card as lost. Cancel immediately. Issue new card. The screen refreshed. Card ending in 4521 has been deactivated. The subscriptions would bounce tomorrow. The fake followers would stop coming. The growth would flatline. Next, I opened a new tab. I searched for Moving Van Rental Street, Paul. I found a company with a 24-hour automated booking system. Pickup date Saturday. Time 6 a.m., 6 in the morning. Bob from the lodge wasn't coming for the desk until 9. I would be gone 3 hours before he arrived. I filled out the form. I paid the deposit with a different credit card, one they had never seen. Booking confirmed. I sat there in the glow of the screen. The room was dark. Downstairs, the laughter had stopped. The house was settling into its night rhythm. The domestic thriller wasn't about a killer in the closet. It was about the people who claimed to love you slowly eating you alive, bite by bite, and convincing you that you were the one feeding them. They wanted me in the basement, fine. I would disappear so completely they would think the basement swallowed me whole. I stood up and began to dismantle my room. I couldn't move furniture yet. That would make noise. That would raise flags. I moved with the stealth of a thief in my own home. I took my jewelry box and wrapped it in a sweatshirt, placing it deep in the proof bin. I took the spare chargers, the cables, the expensive noise-canceling headphones I hid in my drawer. I found my birth certificate where I had hidden it in the closet. I checked it. It was there. I went into the bathroom attached to my room. I cleared the medicine cabinet, prescription medications, my expensive skincare, the things that made me feel human. I packed them into a duffel bag. Every time a floorboard creaked, I froze. Heart hammering, I imagined Dad walking in, seeing the bags. "What are you doing?" "Lila." "Where do you think you're going?" The fear was irrational, but it was real. I felt like an inmate planning an escape. At 2 in the morning, I heard footsteps in the hall. I killed the light instantly. I dove into bed, pulling the covers up to my chin, breathing steadily. The door handle turned. It was locked. I had started locking it 3 days ago. "Lila." It was Carter. His voice was a whisper. I didn't answer. I lay rigid, staring at the dark ceiling. "Lila, are you awake?" He jiggled the handle again. "My card isn't working on Amazon," he whispered. "I need the code for the one on the fridge. I think I typed it wrong." He was trying to buy something at 2 in the morning, probably more followers, or maybe a pop filter for the microphone. "Lila." He knocked softly. I closed my eyes. I imagined the credit card declined notification on his screen. I imagined his confusion. "Ugh," he muttered. "Whatever." I heard his footsteps retreat. I let out a breath that shuddered through my whole body. He wasn't checking on me. He wasn't saying goodnight. He was checking on his wallet. I got out of bed. I couldn't sleep. I went to the window and looked out at the driveway. My car was there, parked behind Dad's truck. I needed to make sure I wasn't blocked in. Saturday morning, 6 a.m. I would have to wake up at 4. I would have to carry the boxes down the stairs one by one, avoiding the creaky step on the third tread. I would have to load the car in the dark, and my desk. I looked toward the door, thinking of the desk downstairs. I couldn't take the desk. It was too heavy. I couldn't move it alone without waking them. Pain spiked in my chest. I loved that desk, but then I realized if I tried to take the desk, I would get caught. If I left the desk, I bought my freedom. It was a ransom payment. Keep the desk, I thought, staring at the closed door. Sell it to Bob for $50. Let it be the last thing you ever take from me. I went back to my laptop. I printed a single sheet of paper. I didn't write a letter. I didn't write a goodbye. I typed out a list. Lila's contributions. Last 12 months. I opened my bills folder on the drive. I started transcribing the numbers from the ledger. January electric, $240, February gas, $180, March groceries, $600, April car repair. Mom, $450, May Carter's, course, $300. I listed it all, down to the penny. At the bottom of the page, I typed a new section. Unauthorized charges. Last 90 days. Social Boost Pro. $150. Instagrow Gold. $300. Trendmaster Viral. $60. Total theft. $510. I hit print. The printer in my room, the one I bought and they didn't know about, whirred softly. I took the paper. I folded it. I wasn't just leaving. I was leaving them with the receipt. Saturday morning couldn't come fast enough. The air in the house was poisonous, and I was holding my breath. Just 30 more hours. 30 hours of acting. 30 hours of nodding. I lay back down, the folded paper under my pillow like a knife. Tomorrow, I would have to smile when Dad talked about Bob. I would have to nod when Carter talked about his audience. But inside, I was already driving the van. I was already turning the key in the lock at St. Paul. I was already gone. Friday night arrived with the heaviness of a storm front. The air in the house was thick, pressurized by the unspoken knowledge that tomorrow was the day my desk, my property, my workspace would be hauled away to satisfy a whim. My parents and Carter were in the living room, engaged in a performance of normalcy. The television was blaring a game show. Carter was on his phone, likely checking the fake follower count that was about to plummet. Mom was folding towels. I walked into the room. I was not holding a weapon. I was holding a single sheet of paper and a roll of Scotch tape. I stood in front of the television. I did not ask for permission to speak. I simply blocked the screen. "I am moving out tomorrow morning," I said. The reaction was immediate. My father, Ron, who had been halfway through a yawn, snapped his mouth shut. He looked at me, blinking, as if I had spoken in a foreign language. "What?" he asked. "I am moving out," I repeated. My voice was steady, anchored by the truth I had been carrying for days. "The movers will be here at 6 in the morning. I have rented an apartment in St. Paul. I will be gone before Bob arrives for the desk." Ron's face went through a spectrum of colors: confusion, then disbelief, and finally, a deep, flushed red of anger. He stood up, the recliner springing back with a metallic groan. "You are what?" he demanded. "You are leaving now." "Tomorrow morning," I corrected. "Because of the desk." He threw his hands up, looking at Mom for support. "This is unbelievable. You are abandoning your family because we asked for a little space because of a room." "It is not about the room," I said. "It is about the room," he shouted. His voice shook the walls. "You are being petty, Lila. You are throwing a tantrum. We are a family. We make sacrifices. And you are willing to tear this family apart because you can't handle sharing." "I have shared," I said. "I have shared everything." "You are betraying us," he spat. The word hung in the air, ugly and heavy. "Betrayal, that is what this is. You are walking out on your duty." There it was, duty. He didn't say love. He didn't say connection. He said duty. He was angry because the employee was quitting without notice. "I am not betraying you," I said. "I am resigning." Resigning. Mom stood up now, clutching a hand towel to her chest. "Lila, honey, don't talk like that. This is your home. We love you. Don't let money or furniture come between us." "Money?" I said. "Since you brought it up." I held up the sheet of paper. It was the document I had printed the night before, the summary of my existence in this house for the last 12 months. "What is that?" Carter asked from the sofa. He looked nervous. He should be. "This is the ledger," I said. I walked over to the refrigerator. This was the family notice board. Usually, it held wedding invitations, magnets from trips we never took, and Carter's abysmal report cards from trade school that Mom insisted on displaying for encouragement. I tore off a piece of tape. The sound was sharp, like a fabric ripping. I taped the paper to the stainless steel door, right at eye level. "This is a breakdown of my contributions to this household over the last 12 months, I said. I stepped back so they could see it. Ron scoffed. "Oh, here we go. The accountant speaks." "Read it," I said. My father crossed his arms and refused to look, but Mom walked over. She squinted at the paper. "January electric bill," she read, her voice trembling slightly. $240. February gas, $180. March groceries, $600. She paused. She looked at me. "Lila, we know you help out." "Keep reading," I said. "April car repair. Mom's transmission." She read. Her voice dropped to a whisper. $450. "I paid that," I said, "because you said you didn't have the cash. You said you would pay me back when Dad's bonus came. Dad got the bonus. You went to the casino. I never saw a dime." Ron stiffened. "That was a family trip. You were invited." "I was working," I said. "To pay for the transmission." Mom continued down the list. Her eyes widened as she reached the bottom. The numbers didn't lie. They accumulated, row after row, a towering monument of financial extraction. "Total," she whispered, $14,250. The room went silent. The game show on the television chimed with a winning sound that felt grotesque in the quiet. $14,000, I said. "That is what it cost me to live here this year. That is after taxes. That is my savings. That is my life." I pointed to the bottom of the page. I had written the final entry in thick black marker, bold and undeniable. "Read the last line," I said. Mom stared at it. She didn't want to say it. "Read it," I commanded. It was the first time in my life I had given my mother an order. "Carter's contributions," she read, her voice barely audible. $0. I looked at Carter. He was sinking into the sofa cushions, trying to make himself small. "And next to it," I said, "Confidence Unlimited." Mom read. I turned to my father. "You said I am betraying the family because of a room. I am not leaving because of the room. Dad, I am leaving because you are running a business, and I am the only investor who never gets a return. You are liquidating my assets to fund his vanity." I pointed at Carter. "And speaking of vanity," I said, "you might want to check your bank statements." "Mom, because I found $500 of unauthorized charges on my card for social media growth services. I assumed since you borrowed my card. You authorized them." Mom gasped. She turned to Carter. "Carter?" Carter's face went white. It was for the brand. Mom. I was going to pay her back when the sponsorship came in. "There is no sponsorship," I said. "There are 41 followers, and 30 of them are bots I paid for without knowing it." Ron looked at his son. For a second, just a second, I saw the veil slip. I saw him look at Carter and see him not as a prodigy, but as a leech. But then, the habit of a lifetime kicked in. He turned the anger back on me. "So you are humiliating him," Ron shouted. "Is that it? You printed this out to shame us." "I printed it out to correct the record," I said. "You think I am the child who needs to be managed. You think I am the one who needs to be pushed into the basement. I am showing you that I am the one keeping the lights on." I walked to the stairs. I stopped and looked back at them. They were a tableau of dysfunction. Mom staring at the fridge like it was a tombstone. Dad red-faced and impotent. Carter looking at the floor. "Here is the schedule," I said. I spoke with the cool detachment of a project manager outlining a termination. "The movers arrive at 6. I will be gone by 8. The internet service is in my name. I have scheduled a cancellation for Monday morning at 9 o'clock. You have the weekend to find a new provider." "You are cutting off the internet," Carter cried out. It was the first time he had spoken. The loss of Wi-Fi was evidently more terrifying to him than the loss of his sister. "It is in my name," I said. "I am taking it with me." "And the electric?" Dad asked. His voice was lower now, laced with a dawning fear. "I have requested a transfer of service," I said. "They will bill the homeowner starting Monday. That is you, Dad." "Lila, you can't do this," Mom said, tears finally spilling over. "We can't afford all those deposits at once. You have $14,000 of extra room in your budget now that I am not costing you anything," I said. "Right, I am just a burden on the space. Isn't that what you said?" I didn't wait for an answer. I walked up the stairs. Behind me, the silence was absolute. No one yelled. No one chased me. They were paralyzed by the sudden removal of the support beams they hadn't realized were holding up the roof. I went into my room and closed the door. I didn't lock it. I didn't need to. They wouldn't come in. They were afraid of me now. They were afraid of the person who had written that list. I spent the night finishing the packing. I stripped the bed. I took the curtains. I packed the lamp. I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor, watching the digital clock on my phone tick towards 6 a.m. At 5:45, I heard the rumble of a diesel engine outside. I looked out the window. A white van was pulling up to the curb. 2 men in blue coveralls hopped out. I grabbed my bag. I walked downstairs. The house was silent. The living room was dark, save for the standby light on the television. The paper was still on the fridge, a white rectangle glowing in the dim light of the kitchen. I opened the front door. The cold morning air hit me, sharp and clean. It smelled of snow and exhaust fumes. "Morning," one of the movers said. "You the move?" "I am the move," I said. For the next hour, the only sounds were the heavy footsteps of the men and the thud of boxes being loaded. I stood by the door, holding the clipboard, checking off the items. Box 1 work, Box 2 bills, Box 3, proof, around 7 o'clock. I heard movement upstairs. Carter came down first. He was wearing pajama pants and a t-shirt. He looked disheveled. He stood at the top of the stairs, rubbing his eyes. He saw the empty space where the coat rack used to be. It was mine. He saw the boxes disappearing into the van. He didn't say anything. He just watched. Then Mom appeared. She was wearing her robe. She looked old. The morning light was not kind to the fear in her eyes. "Lila," she said. "It wasn't a plea. It was just a name." I didn't answer. I picked up the last box, my personal file box. I walked past them. I didn't look at the floor. I didn't look at the walls. I looked straight ahead, toward the open door. As I stepped onto the porch, I passed Dad. He was standing in the doorway of the kitchen, a mug of coffee in his hand. He looked at the moving van, then at me. "You will be back," he said. It was a statement, but it sounded thin. It lacked the weight of his usual commands. "You will run out of money. You will realize how hard it is out there." I stopped. I turned to him. "I have been out there for years. Dad," I said. "I have just been paying for you to stay in here." I walked down the steps. I climbed into the passenger seat of the van. The driver looked at me. "Ready." "Ready," I said, as the van pulled away. I looked in the side mirror. The front door was open. Mom and Dad were shadows in the hallway, but on the porch, Carter had stepped out. He was holding something. It was his new microphone. He was clutching it to his chest like a teddy bear. He looked lost. He looked at the sky, then at the van. I knew what he was thinking. He was thinking about Monday. He was thinking about the silence that was coming. He had the equipment. He had the studio space. He was about to have the big wraparound desk. But as the van turned the corner and the house disappeared from view, I knew the truth. He had the microphone, but he had no signal. He had no audience. And for the first time in his life, he had no one to blame but the silence I left behind. The first thing that hit me about the apartment in St. Paul was not the smell of fresh paint or the view of the gray city skyline through the industrial windows. It was the silence. For the first 48 hours, I existed in a state of sensory shock. My body was still vibrating with the frequency of the house I had left behind. I woke up at 6 in the morning. My muscles tensed, waiting for the slam of a bathroom door or the heavy thud of my father's footsteps in the hallway. I waited for the inevitable shout of my name, the two syllables that had become synonymous with a demand, Leela, but the shout never came. The only sound in the studio was the rhythmic clanking of the steam radiator and the distant hum of traffic on the highway. I made coffee just 1 cup, strong and black, using beans I had bought for myself without worrying about the price per pound. I sat by the window and watched the steam rise from the mug. I drank it slowly. There was no one to ask where the sugar was. There was no one to complain that the pot was empty. There was no one to ask me to fix the toaster while I was still trying to wake up. It was peaceful, but it was also terrifying. I realized that for 29 years, my entire identity had been defined by reaction. I was the person who responded. I was the person who fixed. Without the crisis, without the constant barrage of needs, I felt unmoored. I wandered around the small space, touching the exposed brick walls, trying to figure out who Lila Nelson was when she wasn't being useful to someone else. Then, the phone started to vibrate. It began on Monday morning, right around 9 o'clock, the exact time the internet service at the old house was scheduled to terminate. I was sitting at my new desk, a simple, sturdy table I had found at a thrift store, working on a spreadsheet for Holleridge Digital. My phone lit up on the table next to me. Mom. I stared at the screen. I did not pick it up. I watched the name pulse and fade. Pulse and fade. A minute later, a text message appeared. The preview popped up on my lock screen. Wi-Fi is not working. The little light is red. What do I do? I looked at the message. In the past, this text would have triggered an immediate biological response. My heart rate would have spiked. I would have felt a surge of guilt and annoyance. I would have called her back instantly, walking her through the reset process, or worse. I would have promised to drive over on my lunch break to look at it. Now, I just looked at the bubble. I visualized her standing in the hallway, tapping on the router, baffled by the sudden lack of connectivity. I swiped the notification away. I did not reply. I went back to my spreadsheet. 2 hours later, my father called. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message. I listened to it on speakerphone while I ate a sandwich I had made exactly the way I liked it, with extra mustard and no crusts. A luxury I never bothered with at the house because someone else always wanted the crusts cut off differently. Lila, his voice said. It sounded tight, controlled, but with an undercurrent of panic. The heater is making that clanking noise again, the one it made last winter. I think the pilot light is flickering. I need you to come look at it. I don't want to call a technician and pay a service fee if it is just a loose valve. I picked up the phone. I typed a reply, keeping it brief and clinical. There are troubleshooting guides on the manufacturer's website. You can find the model number on the side of the unit. I hit send. Then I paused. A dry, humorless laugh bubbled up in my throat. I realized the absurdity of my advice. I had told him to check the website, but he couldn't check the website because I had canceled the internet. He was standing in a cold house with a clanking heater, holding a phone that could no longer connect to the world because the person who paid for the connection had walked out the door. I put the phone face down. I did not feel guilty. I felt a strange, cold satisfaction. It was the feeling of gravity finally working the way it was supposed to. Actions had consequences. Incompetence had costs. By Wednesday, the tone of the messages had shifted from confusion to accusation. Carter sent me a direct message on a social media platform I hadn't blocked him on yet. "You are ruining everything," he wrote. "I had a live stream scheduled for tonight. I can't go live on cellular data. It is too slow. I am losing engagement. Do you have any idea what you are doing to my career?" I looked at the word career. He used it with such conviction, as if his hobby of talking about himself into a void was equivalent to performing open-heart surgery. I typed back. My thumbs moved with a precision that surprised me. A career does not stand on the paid bills of other people. If your business model requires your sister to subsidize your overhead, you do not have a business, you have a dependency. He saw the message. The little read icon appeared instantly. He did not reply. I set the phone aside and opened my banking app. It was Friday payday. For the last 5 years, payday had been a source of anxiety. As soon as the direct deposit hit, I would start the mental subtraction. 200 for the electric, 100 for the water, 300 for groceries, 50 for whatever emergency mom invents by noon. Usually, by the end of payday. My account balance looked almost the same as it had the day before. The money was a pass-through entity. I was just the tunnel it traveled through on its way to my family. Today, the number sat there. $2,400. I paid my rent for the next month. I paid my own electric bill, which was projected to be $40. I paid my phone bill. The number barely moved. I stared at the balance. $1,500 remained. It was mine. It wasn't spoken for. It wasn't allocated to a transmission repair or a medical deductible or a loan that would never be repaid. I felt a lump in my throat. It was a mixture of relief and grief. I grieved for the years of compounding interest I had lost. I grieved for the vacations I hadn't taken, but mostly, I felt a fierce protectiveness over this number. This was my freedom. This was the wall between me and the chaos. I decided to celebrate. I was going to buy a bottle of wine, a good bottle, maybe $20, and I was going to buy a set of high thread count sheets because the ones I had taken from the house were old and pilled. I walked down to the mailboxes in the lobby. I was humming. I felt light. I opened box 4B. Inside was a small stack of mail, a flyer for a local pizza place, a welcome packet from the utility company, and a white envelope with a red stamp on the front. Urgent past due. I frowned. I had just moved in. I couldn't be past due on anything. I looked at the return address. North Star Building Supplies. My stomach dropped. North Star was a massive hardware and construction supply chain. I had never shopped there. I bought my clothes at department stores and my food at groceries. I had no reason to buy lumber or drywall. I ripped the envelope open. My hands were suddenly cold. I pulled out the letter. It was a collection notice. Dear Lila Nelson, this letter is to inform you that your account ending in 894 is 90 days past due. The current outstanding balance is $3,242.16. Failure to remit payment within 10 days will result in this debt being reported to the credit bureaus and may result in legal action. I leaned against the wall of the lobby. The humming stopped. The lightness vanished. $3,000. I scanned the document. My eyes locked onto a section near the bottom. Account holder Ron Nelson. Authorized buyer/cosigner Lila Nelson. The memory hit me like a physical blow. 2 years ago, the summer Dad decided he was going to renovate the back deck. He had taken me to the store with him. He was buying lumber, stain, and a new power saw. At the register, the clerk had asked if he wanted to open a pro account to save 15%. Sure, Dad had said. He filled out the form. Then he had turned to me, smiling that easy, charming smile. Hey, honey, put your name down too, just in case I need you to pick up nails for me sometime. Plus, it helps with the credit check if there are 2 names. Just in case. I had signed it. I had signed it because we were family. I had signed it because I trusted him. I had signed it because it was just a hardware store account, not a mortgage. He never finished the deck. The wood rotted in the backyard. But apparently, he had kept using the card. I looked at the itemized list attached to the letter. October DeWalt drill set. $200, November snowblower. $800, December patio heater, $400. He had been shopping. He had been buying toys, and he had been ignoring the bills. He knew. He had to know. They would have called the house. They would have sent letters to the house. He had hidden them. He had thrown them away, knowing that eventually they would come for the authorized buyer. He knew I had perfect credit. He knew I was the backstop. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the cold tile floor of the lobby. The letter shook in my hand. This was not just negligence. This was financial violence. He had planted a bomb in my financial history and handed me the detonator without telling me what it was. If this hit my credit report, my score, the 780 I was so proud of, The score that got me this apartment would tank. I would look like a risk. I would look like him. I closed my eyes. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive back to the house, kick down the door, and shove this paper down his throat. I wanted to scream. I left. I escaped. You aren't allowed to reach me here. But screaming wouldn't pay the bill. Screaming wouldn't fix the credit score. I took a deep breath. I held it for 4 seconds. I exhaled for 4 seconds. I stood up. I walked back up the stairs to my apartment. I did not buy the wine. I did not buy the sheets. I sat down at my desk. I placed the letter in the center of the table. I was not Lila the daughter anymore. I was not Lila the fixer. I was Lila Nelson, a woman who was currently under attack. I picked up my phone. I dialed the number for the credit card issuer listed on the letter. North Star Financial Services. How may I help you? A voice asked. My name is Lila Nelson, I said. My voice was rock steady. It sounded like a stranger's voice. I am calling regarding a delinquency notice I received today. Account ending in 894. One moment, please. Yes, I see the account. Ms. Nelson, we have been trying to reach the primary account holder for months. I am aware, I said. I need to know exactly what my liability is here. I am listed as an authorized buyer. Actually, ma'am, looking at the original contract, you are listed as a joint account holder with full liability. That means you are equally responsible for the debt. The room spun slightly. Joint account holder. He had lied. He said, authorized buyer for picking up nails. He had signed me up as a co-borrower. Okay, I said. Thank you for clarifying. I need to freeze this account immediately. No further charges are to be authorized. I can place a hold on the card, the representative said. But the balance is still due. I understand, I said. I will handle the balance. Please send me a copy of the original contract with the signatures and a full transaction history for the life of the account. I can do that. Is there anything else? Yes, I said. Remove my name from any marketing lists. I do not want to receive coupons. I hung up. I looked at the balance on my screen. $1,500. The debt was $3,200. If I paid it, I would wipe out my savings. I would be back to zero. I would be eating ramen noodles in the dark. But if I didn't pay it, he would drag me down with him. I realized then that my physical departure was only the first step. Leaving the house was the easy part. Cutting the emotional cord was harder. But surgically removing the financial cancer they had embedded in my life, that was going to be the fight of my life. I opened a new browser tab. I searched for Consumer Protection Attorney St. Paul. I searched for Financial Advisor for Debt Separation. I was going to pay this bill. I had to. I wouldn't let his irresponsibility ruin my future, but this was the last time. I picked up the red pen I used for editing contracts. I wrote on the top of the letter, Final Settlement. I wasn't doing this to be nice. I wasn't doing this to help Dad out of a jam. I was doing this to buy my name back. I looked out the window at the city. The sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the brick buildings. I didn't leave to punish them, I whispered to the empty room. I left so I wouldn't drown. But as I looked at that letter, I realized they were still trying to pull me under. They had one hand on my ankle, gripping tight. I picked up my phone again. I didn't call Dad. I didn't call Mom. I called the number for a credit monitoring service and signed up for the most aggressive lockdown protection plan they offered. Then, I booked an appointment for the next morning with the bank. I was going to audit my entire life, every account, every subscription, every piece of paper with the name Nelson on it. If they wanted a war over resources, they were about to discover that they had lost their only quartermaster. And this time, I wasn't bringing supplies. I was bringing an audit. The document from North Star Financial Services arrived in my email inbox at 8 in the morning on Tuesday. It was a PDF file, 5 pages long, dense with legal jargon and fine print. I printed it out at the library because I was saving ink. I sat in my car in the library parking lot and read every single word. It was not a mistake. It was not a clerical error. It was a trap that had been set 2 years ago, baited with a lie so casual I had barely registered swallowing it. I remembered the day clearly. We were at the checkout counter of the hardware store. The air smelled of sawdust and fertilizer. My father, Ron, had a cart full of pressure-treated lumber for the deck he swore he was going to build that summer. The cashier had asked, "Do you want to put this on a store account?" "You get 15% off today." Dad had turned to me. "Lila, do you have your license? Let's put you on there too. It is just for the discount. Plus, if I am ever stuck at work, you can pick up supplies for me." It sounded logical. It sounded helpful. But looking at the contract in my lap, the reality was starkly different. The box checked was not authorized user. It was joint account holder. Below that, in a section I had not read, because I was 27 and trusted my father, was a clause in bold text. Both parties are jointly and severally liable for all charges, interest, and fees incurred on this account, regardless of who initiates the transaction. He hadn't just added me to a discount program. He had taken out a line of credit in my name, using his authority as my father to bypass my scrutiny. He knew that if he applied a loan, with his history of missed payments and debt shuffling, he would get a limit of maybe $500. But with me, with my spotless history, my steady income, my neurotic responsibility, he got a limit of $5,000, and he had spent $3,000, $200 of it. I looked at the date on the transaction history. The most recent purchase was a $400 patio heater, bought 3 weeks ago. He bought a patio heater while he was telling me he couldn't afford to fix the furnace. I started the engine of my car. I was not going to work. I was taking a personal day. I drove to the suburbs. The drive usually took 30 minutes, but today it felt like 30 seconds. I was in a trance of cold, hard fury. This was different from the desk. This was different from the rent I paid in groceries. This was legal fraud committed by the people who were supposed to protect me. I pulled into the driveway at 11 o'clock in the morning. It was a Tuesday. Normal people were at work. My family was home. I saw Carter's car in the driveway. I saw Dad's truck. I walked to the front door. I still had my key, but I didn't use it. I rang the doorbell. I waited. It took a full minute before the door opened. Mom stood there, blinking in the bright sunlight. She was wearing her bathrobe, holding a coffee mug. When she saw me, her face lit up with a reflex of hope, then immediately crumbled into confusion when she saw my outfit. I was not wearing sweatpants. I was wearing my charcoal gray suit. I was wearing the heels I wore to client presentations. I was holding a leather portfolio. "Lila," she said, "is everything okay? Why are you dressed like that?" "Is Dad home?" I asked. "He is in the living room watching the news." Come in. Come in. Do you want coffee?" I stepped inside. The house smelled the same stale coffee and denial, but it felt smaller, or maybe I was just taking up more space. I walked past her into the living room. Ron was in his recliner, the remote balanced on the armrest. Carter was on the sofa, scrolling on his phone. "Well, look who it is," Dad said, not looking away from the television. "Run out of money already. Need to do laundry." I walked over to the television and turned it off. The screen went black. "Hey," Dad sat up, indignant. "I was watching that." "We are having a meeting," I said. I walked to the dining table, the table where they had told me they were taking my office, and set my portfolio down. I unzipped it. The sound was a sharp zipper-teeth growl in the quiet room. "Sit down," I said. "Lila, what is this?" Mom asked, hovering by the doorway. "You are scaring me." "Sit down," I repeated. They sat. Dad looked annoyed. Carter looked bored. Mom looked terrified. I took the papers out of the portfolio. I slid the contract across the table toward my father. "What is this?" he asked, squinting at it without picking it up. "That is the contract for the North Star account," I said. "The one you told me was for a discount. The one you told me was just so I could pick up nails." Dad's expression shifted. A flicker of recognition, followed by a mask of defensive indifference. "Oh, that, yeah, the hardware store. What about it?" I received a collection notice yesterday, I said. $3,200, past due. The account is in default. It is not in default, he said, waving a hand. I missed a payment or two. I was going to catch up next month. You haven't made a payment in 4 months, I said. And you opened it as a joint account. Do you know what that means? Dad? It means we share the perks, he said, trying to smile. It means we share the debt, I corrected. It means when you don't pay. My credit score drops. It means when you default. The collection agency calls me. It means you used my credit history to buy toys you couldn't afford, and you legally bound me to the wreckage. You are blowing this out of proportion, he said. He pushed the paper back toward me. It is just a store card. Everyone has debt. It is the American way. It is fraud, I said. The word hung in the air. Mom gasped. Lila, do not use that word with your father. What else do you call it? I asked, turning to her. He told me it was for a discount. He had me sign a document that made me liable for thousands of dollars of purchases I didn't authorize. He hid the bills. He hid the late notices. That is deception. That is fraud. He didn't mean to, Mom said, her eyes filling with tears. He gets confused with the paperwork. He thought he was doing a good thing, helping you build credit. I looked at her. He didn't mean to, Mom. Look at the items. A snowblower, a patio heater, a drill set. Those aren't accidents. Those are purchases. If he doesn't understand the contract, he shouldn't be signing it, and he certainly shouldn't be making me sign it. You are being so harsh, she sobbed. He is your father. And I am his victim right now, I said. Carter, who had been silent, finally looked up from his phone. He let out a loud sigh, as if my concern over my financial future was interrupting his very important schedule of doing nothing. God, Lila, chill out, he said. You have, a perfect credit score. You have plenty of points to spare. What is the big deal if it drops a little? You are acting like he stole your kidney. I turned my head slowly to look at him. The silence that followed was absolute. There it was, the naked truth. Say that again, I said softly. I said you have plenty of credit, Carter said, rolling his eyes. You are the responsible one. You can take the hit. Dad needed the stuff for the house. It is not like he went to Vegas. Why are you so stingy with your credit score? It is just a number. I looked at my brother. I looked at my parents. They didn't see me as a person. They didn't see me as a woman with dreams of buying her own home one day, or getting a business loan, or simply living without fear. They saw me as a resource. I was a battery. I was a wallet, and now I was a credit score, to them. My financial health was a communal pool that they were entitled to dip into whenever they got thirsty. Carter truly believed that because I had plenty, it was my duty to absorb their damage. It was the logic of a parasite. It is just a number, I repeated. That number decides if I can buy a house. That number decides what interest rate I pay on a car. That number is the mathematical representation of my reputation. And you think you have the right to ruin it because you wanted a patio heater? We needed the heater, Dad grumbled. It gets cold on the porch. You don't sit on the porch, I shouted. It was the first time I raised my voice. You sit in this chair and watch television. I took a deep breath. I stood up. I smoothed my skirt. Okay, I said. Here is how this is going to end. I pulled a second document from my portfolio. It was a formal letter I had drafted the night before, after researching consumer protection laws, until 3 a.m. This is a demand letter, I said. It states that I'm revoking my authorization on the account and demanding my name be removed, but the bank won't do that until the balance is 0. I placed the letter in front of Ron. You have 2 choices, I said. Option A. You call North Star right now, on speakerphone. You set up a payment plan to pay off the full balance within 6 months. You authorize them to close the account to new charges immediately. You acknowledge to them, on a recorded line, that I am no longer a responsible party. I can't pay that in 6 months, Dad said. I am on a fixed income. Then sell the snowblower, I said. Sell the patio heater. Sell the drill. I don't care. And option B, Carter asked, smirking slightly. You sue us. Option B, I said, looking directly at my father, is that I file a police report for identity theft and credit card fraud. I will report that I was coerced into signing a contract under false pretenses. I will dispute every single charge as unauthorized, and I will press charges. Ron's face went purple. You wouldn't dare. I am your father. You would put your own father in jail over money. I would put a thief in jail, I said. Don't make me decide which one you are. This is disrespectful, he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. I raised you, I fed you, and this is how you repay me by threatening me in my own house. This isn't about respect, Dad, I said. This is about math. Math doesn't care about your feelings. Math doesn't care that you raised me. Math says you owe $3,000, and you are trying to make me pay it. I will pay it when I can, he yelled. I am good for it. Your credit score is 520, I said. You are not good for it. I checked. He went silent. The shame of the number hit him harder than the accusation of fraud. 72 hours, I said. I looked at my watch. It is 11:15 on Tuesday. You have until 11:15 on Friday to provide me with proof that a payment plan is in place and my name is being removed. If I do not receive that proof, I walk into the police precinct at noon on Friday. Lila. Please, Mom begged. We can work this out. We can pay you a little each month. No, I said. No more side deals. No more paying me back later. I want it legal. I want it on paper. I want it done. I picked up my portfolio. I turned to leave. You are cold, Carter said. He wasn't smirking anymore. He looked a little afraid. You have changed. You are like a robot. I stopped at the door. I looked back at them. The living room looked like a museum exhibit of a life I used to live. The faded carpet, the dusty curtains, the people frozen in their entitlement. I am not a robot, Carter, I said. I am just closed for business. I walked out the door. Ron yelled something after me. It sounded like ungrateful, or maybe unbelievable. I didn't stop. I walked to my car. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. They were shaking from the adrenaline of finally cutting the last wire. I got into the car and locked the doors. I sat there for a moment, looking at the house for years. I had thought that love meant saying yes. I thought that being a good daughter meant absorbing their chaos so they could be comfortable. But today, looking at the man who had tricked me into debt and the brother who thought my credit score was a renewable resource, I realized the truth. They didn't want a daughter. They wanted a shield, and the shield just walked away. I put the car in reverse. I had 72 hours to wait. I knew they would try to call my bluff. They would try to guilt me. They would try to ignore it, but they had never seen this version of me. They had never seen the Lila who checked the fine print. I drove away, leaving them to figure out how to pay for the heat they were so desperate to keep. Now that the human furnace had finally gone cold, the cold snap hit Minneapolis on Thursday night. A brutal, bone-cracking freeze that dropped the temperature to 20 degrees below zero. It was the kind of cold that turned breath into ice crystals before it even left your lips. The kind of cold that tested the structural integrity of every home in the state. My phone rang at 6 a.m. on Friday. It was 77 hours into my 72-hour ultimatum regarding the hardware store debt. I looked at the caller ID, Dad. I let it ring 3 times. I sat up in bed, wrapping my duvet around my shoulders, listening to the radiator in my studio hiss with comforting, functional warmth. I picked up the phone. This is Lila, I said. Lila. My father's voice cracked. He sounded small. He sounded shivering. The furnace. It stopped. It is making a grinding noise. And then it just died. It is 50 degrees in the house and dropping. Call a repair service, I said. Emergency heating repair. I can't, he whispered. The panic in his voice was not just about the temperature, it was about the bank account. They want $300 just to come out. Emergency rates, plus parts. We don't have it. Lila? Not until the 1st. I closed my eyes. I knew this would happen. I had warned him about the heater months ago. He had ignored it because he assumed I would handle it when the time came. Please, he said. Your mother is wrapped in 3 blankets. We can see our breath in the kitchen. I could have said no. I could have told him to sell the patio heater he bought with my credit. I could have told him to figure it out. But letting them freeze was not the same as letting them fail financially. Physical safety was a line I was not willing to cross. However, I was not going to cross it for free. I will come, I said. Oh, thank God, he breathed. Thank you, honey. I knew you— Stop, I cut him off. I am coming over to fix the furnace. But that is not all I am doing. I am bringing a folder. When I get there, you, Mom, and Carter are going to sit at the kitchen table. We are going to have the conversation we should have had 10 years ago, and you are going to agree to my terms. If you argue, if you hesitate, if Carter makes one snide comment, I turn around and walk out, and you can figure out how to keep warm with a space heater. There was a pause on the line. I heard the wind howling against the siding of their house through the phone. Okay, Dad said. Okay, just come. I arrived 40 minutes later. The house was silent and freezing. When I stepped inside, the air was sharp enough to sting my lungs. Mom was sitting on the sofa buried under a pile of quilts. Carter was wearing his parka and a beanie, pacing the living room with his hands jammed in his pockets. Dad was standing by the window, looking gray and defeated. I did not take off my coat. I did not ask how they were. Kitchen, I said. Now. They followed me. We sat at the table where I had once eaten dinner every night, the table where they had announced they were taking my office. Now, the table was bare, cold to the touch. I placed my leather bag on the table and opened it. I took out a stack of papers. I had spent the last 2 days preparing this. It was not a revenge list. It was a business plan for a failing company. Here is the reality, I said. I laid out a spreadsheet. I ran the numbers based on what I know of Dad's pension and Mom's Social Security, plus the occasional consulting gig. Your monthly fixed income is $3,200. I slapped another piece of paper down. Your monthly operating costs, mortgage, utilities, insurance, food, gas, are $3,800. I looked at them. You are running a $600 deficit every single month, I said. For years. I was the one covering that $600. I was the gap funding. Now, the gap funding is gone. You are bleeding out. Dad stared at the paper. He looked like he wanted to argue. But the numbers were right there, printed in black and white. We can cut back, Mom said, her teeth chattering slightly. We can buy less food. You are already buying the bare minimum, I said. The problem isn't the grocery bill. The problem is that you have 3 adults living in this house, and only 2 of them are contributing income. I turned my gaze to Carter. He shrank back into his parka. I am working on it. Lila, you know that. The podcast is building momentum. I just need time. Time does not pay the gas bill, I said. Momentum does not buy groceries. I pulled out a document titled Tenant Agreement. This is the new deal, I said. If you want this house to function, if you want to eat, if you want heat, this is what happens. I slid the paper toward Carter. Condition 1, I said. Carter pays rent, $300 a month, starting immediately. 300, Carter yelped. I don't have $300, I don't have a job. That brings us to condition 2, I said. You have 30 days to secure employment, not a gig, not a collaboration, a job, a W-2 position that pays actual currency, fast food, retail, warehouse, I don't care. You need to bring in money. But my brand, Carter protested. If I get a day job, I won't have time to record. I won't have the energy to create. You are asking me to kill my dream just to pay a stupid bill. Your dream is killing this family, I said. My voice was low, devoid of the emotional plea I used to make. Your brand is a parasite. It is feeding on Dad's retirement and my credit score. It ends today. A brand doesn't replace rent. If you want to be a creator, do it at night. Do it on the weekends, like everyone else who has a dream and a bill to pay. Dad, Carter turned to his father. Are you going to let her talk to me like this? She's acting like she owns the place. Ron looked at his son. Then he looked at the spreadsheet. He looked at the negative $600. For the first time in his life, Ron Nelson did not jump to defend his golden boy. He looked at the deficit, and he realized that without me, that deficit was going to eat him alive. She is right, Carter, Dad said. His voice was raspy. I can't afford it anymore. Carter's mouth dropped open. You are siding with her. I am siding with the math, I said. Because the math is the only thing that is real right now, I continued. Condition 3, household labor. Mom is 65. She has arthritis. She should not be scrubbing the bathtub while you sit in the basement talking into a microphone. You will take over 50% of the household maintenance, cleaning, yard work, repairs. I am not a maid, Carter sneered. No, I said. You are a tenant who is currently $80,000 in arrears for room and board over the last 6 years. Be grateful I'm not charging back rent. I don't have to listen to this. Carter stood up. I am leaving. Sit down, I said. I didn't shout. I simply projected the command with the authority of someone who held the keys to the kingdom. He hesitated. I have one more thing to show you, I said. And this is why you are going to sign that agreement. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. I unlocked it and opened the banking app. I had taken screenshots of the transaction details I had uncovered earlier in the week. I placed the phone in the center of the table, screen facing up. Twist, I said softly. The image on the screen was a detailed transaction log. Social Boost Pro, $49.99. Instagrow Gold, $99. Trendmaster Viral, $29.99. I did a little digging, I said. I traced the IP address associated with these purchases. It came from inside this house, specifically from a device named Carter's iPhone. Carter froze. The color drained from his face, leaving him pale against the dark collar of his coat. You stole my credit card information, I said. You used the card Mom borrowed to sign me up for recurring subscriptions to buy fake followers. You spent $500 of my money to pretend you were popular. I didn't, Carter stammered. It was an investment. It was theft, I said. I looked at Mom. Did you know? Mom looked at the phone. She looked at the transactions. She looked at Carter. He told me. Mom's voice trembled. He told me the company gave him a trial. He told me the followers were real people who loved his message. He lied, I said. He lied to you to get the card. He lied to me to get the money. And he lied to himself about his talent. Carter turned to Mom. Mom, don't listen to her. She's just trying to humiliate me. I was going to pay her back once the sponsorship hit. But Mom didn't look at him. She was staring at the table. For years, she had protected him. She had believed the myth of his potential because it was easier than facing the reality of his failure. But theft, stealing from his sister, that was a betrayal of the one thing she valued above all else, the image of a good family. She stayed silent. The silence in the kitchen was heavier than the cold. It was the sound of a pedestal crumbling. Sign the paper, I said to Carter, or I file the police report for credit card fraud, along with the identity theft report for Dad. I will send you both to court in the same car. Carter looked at the paper. He looked at Dad, who was staring at the wall. He looked at Mom, who was staring at her hands. He picked up the pen. His hand was shaking. He signed his name. Good, I said. I took the paper and put it back in my bag. I stood up. Where are you going? Dad asked, panic flaring again. The heater. I am going to fix it, I said. I brought my tools. I walked down to the basement. The air down there was frigid, hovering around 40 degrees. I went to the furnace unit. I took off the front panel. It was exactly what I suspected. The thermocouple was shot. It was a $20 part. I pulled the spare thermocouple I had bought at the hardware store on my way over out of my pocket. I got to work. My fingers were numb, but I moved with precision. I unscrewed the copper line. I replaced the sensor. I cleaned the pilot assembly. It took me 45 minutes. I turned the gas valve back on. I struck the lighter. Whoosh! The blue flame of the pilot light flared to life. Stable, strong. I turned the thermostat up. The main burners ignited with a satisfying roar. Heat began to flood the plenum, ready to be pushed up into the ducts. I wiped my hands on a rag. I put the panel back on. I walked back upstairs. The kitchen was already feeling slightly warmer, or maybe it was just the relief in the room. It is fixed, I said. Give it an hour to get back to 70. Dad let out a long, shuddering breath. Thank you, Lila. Thank you. He reached out as if to hug me, but I stepped back. I am not done, I said. I looked at Ron. That was the technical fix. That was the easy part. Now comes the hard part. I pointed to the spreadsheet on the table. You have a budget now. You have a tenant who pays rent. You have a debt to North Star that you're going to start paying off with the money you save by not buying steaks and premium cable packages. I put on my gloves. I am not coming back to fix the next thing, I said. If the sink clogs, watch a video. If the car breaks, take the bus. If you run out of money, eat pasta. I looked at Carter. He was sitting at the table, staring at the tenant agreement as if it were a death warrant. And you? I said. The first $300 is due on the 1st. If you are late, I suggest you start looking for a cardboard box that is insulated, because I will enforce that contract. You are really going to leave us like this? Mom asked. So cold. I fixed the heat, Mom, I said. The house is warm. I am just not setting myself on fire to keep it that way anymore. I walked to the door. Wait, Dad said. I stopped, my hand on the knob. He started, then stopped. He looked at the woman in the gray suit standing in his hallway. He realized he didn't know me. He knew the girl who fixed things. He didn't know the woman who negotiated terms. I am sorry about the credit card. Fix it, I said. That is the only apology I accept. I opened the door and stepped out into the biting wind. It was still 20 below zero. But for the first time in my life, the cold didn't bother me. I felt insulated by boundaries. I felt warm with the fire of my own self-respect. I walked to my car, leaving them to the warmth I had provided, and the reality check they had finally received, the week after the furnace incident. The backlash I had anticipated finally arrived. It did not come from my parents, who were too busy trying to navigate the new austerity measures I had imposed. It came from the extended family. Carter, finding his ego bruised and his credit card access cut off, decided to launch a public relations campaign. He called our Aunt Kathy, my mother's sister, who lived in Florida and had a penchant for offering unsolicited advice on family loyalty. He told her a curated version of the truth. He told her that I had abandoned them in the middle of winter. He told her I had cut off their heat, technically a lie, as I had fixed it. But nuance was never Carter's strong suit. He told her I was having a mental breakdown and was lashing out at the people who loved me. I knew this because my phone blew up on Tuesday afternoon during a conference call. A text message from Aunt Kathy appeared, Lila. I am hearing very disturbing things. How could you leave your parents like that? Family is everything. You need to apologize and go home. You are being selfish. Then came a message from my cousin, heard you went nuclear on Carter. Not cool. In the past, I would have called Aunt Kathy. I would have cried. I would have spent an hour explaining the nuances of the hardware store debt and the emotional labor I had performed for a decade. I would have begged them to understand my side. But the Lila who begged for understanding had moved out. The Lila who remained dealt in data. I opened the family group chat, a digital space usually reserved for holiday greetings and pictures of casseroles. It included my parents, Carter, Aunt Kathy, 2 uncles, and 3 cousins. I did not type a defense. I did not write a paragraph about my feelings. I attached a single image file. It was a simplified version of the spreadsheet I had presented at the kitchen table. The Nelson family deficit contributions. Last 12 months, Lila's contribution, $14,000. $200. Carter's contribution, $0. Ron mom's debt to Lila. Hardware store. $3,000. $200. Carter's theft, unauthorized credit card use. $500. I added a single line of text below the image. Anyone who would like to take over my monthly contribution of $600 to cover the household deficit, please Venmo Dad directly. Otherwise, I consider the matter settled. I hit send. I watched the read receipts populate. Kathy read it. My cousins read it. Carter read it. I waited for the explosion. I waited for the accusations that I was airing dirty laundry, but nothing came. The chat remained silent. 1 hour passed, then 2. Finally, a single message came through from my Uncle Bob, a man of few words. "That is a lot of money." That was it. Aunt Kathy did not reply. My cousins went silent. The smear campaign died instantly because it had collided with the hard, immovable wall of financial reality. It is easy to judge a daughter for leaving. It is much harder to judge a creditor for stopping payment. Carter had tried to fight a war of sentiment, and I had nuked him with a balance sheet. The silence from the relatives seemed to signal a shift within the house itself. The external validation Carter sought was gone, and he was left alone with the internal reality I had enforced. I heard about the changes through short, clipped updates from my father. Carter got a job, Dad told me over the phone on Thursday. He sounded tired, but there was a note of grim satisfaction in his voice. "Where?" I asked. "The distribution center out by the airport. The night shift, loading trucks. I knew that job. It was brutal. It involved lifting 50-pound boxes for 8 hours straight on concrete floors. It was the antithesis of the creative lifestyle Carter had been curating. He starts tonight," Dad said. He tried to say his back hurt, but I told him if he didn't go, he couldn't eat the groceries I just bought. I smiled at my phone. Ron Nelson was finally parenting. It was 20 years late, but he was doing it. The fear of the police report and the North Star debt had terrified him into competence. On Saturday, Mom invited me over for dinner. "I am making lasagna," she said. Her voice was tentative. "Your favorite, with the spicy sausage." "I will come," I said. "But I am driving myself, and I am leaving by 8. "Okay," she said. "Just come." I pulled into the driveway at 6 o'clock. The house looked different to me now. It wasn't a prison anymore. It was just a building where people I knew lived. When I walked in, I saw Carter. He was asleep on the sofa, face down, still wearing his work boots. He looked exhausted. His content creator haircut was messy, and there was a layer of warehouse dust on his jeans. He woke up when the door closed. He sat up, blinking groggily. He looked at me. Usually, this would be the moment he would ask for something. "Lila, get me a water. Lila, my muscles ache. Do you have any ibuprofen?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at my face calm, detached, unyielding, and he remembered the contract. "Hey," he grunted. "Hey," I said. "How is the job?" "It sucks," he said. "My feet are killing me. The supervisor's a jerk." "Welcome to the workforce," I said. "It gets easier after the first 1,000 hours." I walked into the kitchen. Mom was pulling the lasagna out of the oven. "Here, let me help," I said out of habit, reaching for the salad bowl. "No," Mom said. She stopped me, her hand hovering over mine. "You are a guest. Sit down." "Carter," she yelled into the living room. "Carter, come set the table. Lila is here." Carter groaned, a sound of pure teenage regression, but he stood up. He dragged himself into the kitchen. He opened the drawer and took out the silverware. He placed a fork and knife in front of me. I sat there, hands in my lap, watching my brother serve me. It felt surreal. It felt like the world had tilted on its axis. Dinner was quiet. We talked about the weather. We talked about the news. We did not talk about the desk. We did not talk about the followers. When we finished, I stood up to clear my plate. "Leave it," Dad said. "Carter has dish duty tonight." Carter looked at the pile of dirty plates with genuine despair. "I have a shift in 2 hours," he whined. "Then you better scrub fast," Dad said. He pulled an envelope from his shirt pocket and slid it across the table to me. "First installment," Dad said, "for the hardware store card. It is only $100, but I set up a payment plan with North Star for the rest. They agreed not to report it to the credit bureaus, as long as we stay current." I opened the envelope. It was a personal check, written in Dad's shaky handwriting. $100. It was a drop in the bucket compared to the $3,000 he owed. But it wasn't about the amount. It was about the direction of the flow. For the first time in my life, money was flowing from him to me. "Thank you," I said. "I will apply it to the balance." I stayed for another hour, drinking tea while Carter banged pots and pans in the sink. The dynamic had shifted. I was no longer a utility to be used. I was a visitor to be courted. They were careful with me. They asked about my job. They asked about my apartment. They treated me with the polite caution one reserves for a stranger who holds a high rank. At 7:50, I stood up. "I have to go," I said. "I have a morning meeting." I walked to the door. Carter was drying his hands on a towel. He followed me to the entryway. "Lila," he said. I turned. "Yeah." He looked down at his boots. He looked stripped down. The arrogance was gone, sanded away by 3 nights of manual labor and the humiliating realization that his entire digital persona was a fraud I had exposed. "Check your phone," he muttered. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. A notification from a payment app was on the screen. "Carter Nelson sent you $510. There was a note attached to the payment. For the bots. I picked up extra shifts. I was wrong. Don't tell Dad." I looked up at him. He was blushing. A deep, agonizing red that crept up his neck. It was the first time I had ever seen him look truly ashamed. He wasn't sorry he got caught. He was sorry for what he was. He had spent his life believing he was special, and now he was sweating for $15 an hour to pay back a theft he had committed against the only person who had ever supported him. He didn't want Dad to know because Dad still looked at him with a sliver of hope. If Dad knew about the theft, the deliberate, calculated theft, that Hope would die. Carter was protecting the last scrap of his father's respect. I could have told Dad. I could have burned him to the ground. But the money was in my account. The lesson was being learned in the warehouse, not in the court of public opinion. "Okay," I said. "I won't tell him." Carter let out a breath. He leaned against the wall, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. "This sucks," he said quietly. "Living like this, counting every dollar." "Yeah," I said. "It does. That is why I left. Because I was tired of counting yours too." He looked at me then. Really looked at me. Not as his sister, the fixer, not as the bank, but as a woman who had walked out the door and built a life that didn't include him. "You are not coming back, are you?" he asked. "Even if we fix everything, you are not moving back in." "No," I said. "I am not." He nodded slowly. He understood. The safety net was gone. He was walking the tightrope alone now. "Drive safe," he said. I walked out to my car. The night was cold, but the sky was clear. The stars were sharp and bright above the suburban rooflines. I sat in the driver's seat and looked at the notification again. $510. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel an urge to pump my fist. I felt a quiet, steady resolve. I had forced them to grow up. I had forced my father to be a father, and my brother to be a man. It had taken a scorched earth policy to do it, but it was working. I started the car. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw the curtain in the living room window move. Carter was watching me leave. For years. He had watched me leave for work and thought, there goes the resource. Tonight, he watched me leave and thought, there goes the only person who told me the truth. I drove toward the highway, toward St. Paul, toward the silence of my studio. I was no longer the daughter who stayed. I was the woman who visited, and for the first time, that distinction felt like a victory. It was June when the invitation came. It did not come as a frantic text message asking if I was free to look at a leaking faucet. It did not come as a guilt-laden voicemail from my mother about how much they missed me. It came as a calendar invite to my email address. Dinner at the Nelson House. Saturday, 7 o'clock in the evening. Attendance requested, not required. I stared at the screen in my studio. The sunlight was streaming through the windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air of a space that was entirely, blissfully mine. In the 6 months since I had walked out the door with my life packed in 3 plastic bins, I had visited the house exactly 4 times. Each visit had been short. Each visit had been precise. I was a diplomat visiting a foreign country. Polite but guarding my passport, I accepted the invite. When I pulled into the driveway on Saturday evening, the sun was still high, casting long, golden shadows across the lawn. I noticed immediately that the grass was cut. Not just cut, but edged along the sidewalk. There were no dandelions. The hedges were trimmed. I walked to the front door. I did not use my key. I rang the bell. Carter answered. He looked different. The soft, doughy look of a man who spent his days indoors waiting for internet fame was gone. He was leaner. His hands were rougher. He was wearing a button-down shirt tucked into clean jeans. There were dark circles under his eyes, the kind that come from waking up at 4 in the morning for a shift, but his eyes themselves were clear. "Hey," he said. He stepped back to let me in. "You are right on time." Traffic was light, I said. The house smelled of roasting chicken and rosemary. It was a smell I remembered from my childhood, from before the money got tight and the resentment got heavy. We sat in the dining room. The table was set with the good china, the plates with the gold rim that Mom usually saved for Christmas. There were cloth napkins. There was a bottle of red wine breathing on the sideboard. Dad sat at the head of the table. Mom sat to his right. Carter sat to his left. I took the seat opposite Dad. For the first 20 minutes. The conversation was polite. We talked about the humidity. We talked about the Twins' pitching lineup. We talked about my new yoga class. It was the kind of surface-level chatter that families use to pave over cracks. But tonight, the pavement felt solid. It didn't feel like a trap door was waiting to open. When the plates were cleared, Ron Nelson wiped his mouth with his napkin and placed it on the table. He cleared his throat. It was a sound I used to dread, the prelude to a request for money. I stiffened slightly. My hand instinctively moved toward my purse, where my checkbook was not. "Lila," Dad said. He reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a thick white envelope. He slid it across the tablecloth. It stopped right in front of my water glass. "Open it," he said. I picked it up. It was heavy. I opened the flap. Inside was a stack of cash, $100 bills, and behind the cash were several sheets of paper stapled together. "That is $1,200, Dad said. "It is the last installment on the North Star account. I paid the rest off last week." I looked at the papers. It was a letter from North Star Financial Services, to whom it may concern. "The account ending in 894 has been paid in full and closed per the request of the primary account holder. Lila Nelson has been removed from all liability in association with this account." I read the sentence twice. Paid in full, closed. I looked up at him. "I sold the truck," he said quietly. I blinked. "You loved that truck." "I did," he said, "but I couldn't afford the gas. And I certainly couldn't afford the payments on the snowblower and the patio heater I bought with your name. So I sold the truck. I bought a used sedan. It runs fine, and it cleared the debt." He looked me in the eye. His gaze was steady, stripped of the bluster and entitlement that had defined him for so long. "I have been thinking a lot these last 6 months," he said. About the office, about the desk, about the way I asked you to fix things. He took a sip of water. His hand trembled slightly, not from age, but from the difficulty of what he was saying. I got used to you, he said. I got used to you being the safety net. And somewhere along the line, I stopped asking if you wanted to catch us. I just assumed it was your job. I turned your kindness into my right. I was wrong. Lila, I was lazy, and I was selfish, and I was wrong. I sat there, stunned. I had expected them to pay me back eventually. I had enforced it, but I had never expected an admission of guilt. I had never expected Ron Nelson to admit he was lazy. I am sorry, he said. Not just for the money, but for making you feel like you only mattered when you were writing a check. I nodded slowly. I didn't say it is okay, because it wasn't okay, but it was over, and that was enough. Thank you, I said. I appreciate that. Dad turned to Carter. Go ahead. Carter shifted in his chair. He looked at his hands. Then he looked at me. I quit the podcast, he said. Oh, I asked. Yeah, he said. I mean, I haven't recorded in 5 months, but I deleted the channel yesterday. He took a deep breath. You were right about the followers. I knew they were bots. I bought them because it felt good to see the number go up. It felt like I was doing something. But I wasn't doing anything. I was hiding in the basement because I was scared I couldn't hack it in the real world. He gestured to his shirt. I got promoted at the warehouse, he said. Shift supervisor. It is not glamorous. My back hurts every day. But I pay my rent. I pay my share of the groceries. And I'm saving for a certification course in HVAC repair. A real course. At a real school. I paid the tuition deposit myself this morning. He looked at me with a vulnerability that broke my heart a little. Even after everything. I used you as a shield, he said. I let you be the bad guy so I could be the dreamer. That was a coward's move. I am sorry. Lila. I looked at my little brother. He wasn't a boy anymore. He was a man who smelled like soap and hard work. HV. I see, is a good trade, I said. You will be good at it, he smiled. A genuine, shy smile. Yeah, I think so. Then it was Mom's turn. She didn't have an envelope. She didn't have a job title. She just had tears in her eyes. I failed you, she said. Her voice was a whisper, but it cut through the room. Mom, you don't have to... I started. No, she stopped me. I do. I am the mother. It was my job to protect you. It was my job to make sure you were treated fairly. Instead, I let you become the parent. I let you carry the load because it was easier for me than fighting with your father or pushing Carter. I sacrificed you to keep the peace. She reached across the table and touched my hand. Her fingers were warm. I am so proud of you, she said. Not because you helped us, but because you were strong enough to stop helping us. You saved this family by leaving it. The room fell silent. The weight of the words hung in the air, shimmering and real. We ate dessert, a lemon cake Mom had made from scratch. It was tart and sweet. We ate in a comfortable silence, the kind that only comes after the hard things have been said. And then, the climax arrived. It happened as I was cutting my second slice of cake. From the kitchen, a loud, grinding noise erupted. Kerchunk! Thud. It was the dishwasher. It sounded like a gear had stripped and a spray arm had flown off. It was a violent, mechanical death rattle. The sound echoed through the dining room, and in that instant, purely out of muscle memory, purely out of a decade of conditioning, 3 heads turned toward me. Dad looked at me, Mom looked at me, Carter looked at me. Their eyes were wide. The unspoken question was written on their faces. What was that? What do we do? Fix it. Time seemed to slow down. In the old days, this would have been the moment I stood up. This would have been the moment I sighed, put down my fork, walked into the kitchen, pulled out the toolbox, and spent 2 hours on my knees in a puddle of dirty water while they finished their coffee. I sat there. I looked at the dishwasher, which was now humming ominously. I looked at my father. I picked up my fork. I cut a small piece of lemon cake. I lifted it to my mouth. I chewed slowly. I swallowed. I took a sip of wine. I did not move to get up. I did not offer a diagnosis. I did not ask if they had a warranty. I looked at Ron. "That sounds expensive," I said calmly. "Ba, you should handle that." I used the Vietnamese word for dad ba, a slip of intimacy, but the command was in English. "You handle that." The silence stretched for 5 seconds. Ron looked at me. He saw that I was not moving. He saw that the bank was closed. He saw that the mechanic had retired. He blinked. He looked at the kitchen door. Then, he turned his head to the left. "Carter," Ron said, "go turn the water valve off under the sink, then get the manual out of the drawer and see what the error code is. Tomorrow morning. You call the service line." Carter didn't argue. He didn't look at me to save him. He didn't complain about his back. "On it," Carter said. He stood up. He walked into the kitchen. I heard the cabinet door open. I heard the water shut off. I took another bite of cake. It was the best cake I'd ever tasted. 10 minutes later, I stood up to leave. "Thank you for dinner," I said. "It was delicious." "Do you have to rush?" Mom asked. "We could play cards." "I do," I said. "I have a busy week coming up." I didn't offer details. I didn't need them to validate my schedule. I walked to the door. Dad walked me out. "Drive safe," he said. He didn't ask when I was coming back. He respected that my time was my own. "I will," I said. I walked down the driveway to my car. The evening air was cool and sweet. As I sat in the driver's seat, my phone buzzed in my purse. I pulled it out. It was an email notification. From HR. Holleridge Digital Subject Promotion Contract Renewal. I opened it. "Dear Lila, we are pleased to offer you the position of Senior Project Lead. This new role comes with a 20% salary increase and a dedicated team under your supervision. We value your ability to set boundaries and manage resources effectively." I smiled. I put the phone down. I started the car. I looked back at the house one last time. The kitchen light was on. I could see Carter's shadow moving back and forth, holding a wrench. I could see Dad standing next to him, pointing at something, reading from a manual. They were figuring it out. I put the car in reverse and backed out onto the street. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry. I felt light. I didn't leave to hurt them. I left so they couldn't live on my back anymore. And in doing so, I had given them the greatest gift I could, the necessity to stand on their own 2 feet. Thank you so much for listening to Lila's story. It is a journey that I know many of you can relate to, the struggle between loving your family and saving yourself. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from a quiet apartment in New York, a busy cafe in London, or maybe on your commute in Sydney? Please leave a comment below and let me know where in the world you are. And if you have ever had to set a hard boundary with the people you love, if this story resonated with you, please make sure to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories for more tales of justice and reclaiming your life. Don't forget to hit that like button, and if you really want to support the channel, smash that hype button so we can get this story out to everyone who needs to hear it. See you in the next video. Stay strong.